Hey everyone, and welcome to day 32 of our study through the New Testament. We are looking at Jesus leaving Judea, and so I'm going to start this one out a little bit different. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel. We do this. This is a daily Bible study. We do typically a 5 to 10 minute video. Sometimes they go a little bit longer than that. But if you haven't, and if you would like to receive notifications when these come out, then you can subscribe to our channel. Hit the notification button if you want to as well. And that way you see these every day. And we publish these every morning. So that way, and we have a study guide to go along with them. And you can sign up. There's a link in our description here where you can sign up to join our study and be part of our discussion as a group as well. So if you'd be interested to do that, go ahead and do that. But let's get into today's study. And so we're looking at Jesus leaving Judea. And again, this is going to be a short one again today. It's just a couple verses. Mark 1, verse 14 covers this. And it sums up a lot that happened, but it sums it up in just one verse. It says, later on after John was arrested, which we looked at that. Um, yesterday. So John, Herod put John in prison. We looked at that yesterday. And so it kind of briefly mentions that and says Jesus went into Galilee where he preached God's good news. And so Mark, along with Matthew and Luke, they passed directly from the temptation into the beginning of the Galilean ministry. They skipped the intervening ministry in Judea. So only John kind of covers that. So not sure why. Mainly, it might be because John was more likely with them when that happened. I don't believe Matthew or Mark or definitely Luke wouldn't have been with them, and his sources may not have been with him at that time. So maybe that's why John covers that in a little bit more detail than the others do. So that's probably a little bit of the reason we see that. Again, we don't know 100% for sure, but that a very good likely reason. And then we see in John 4 verses 1 through 3, it says Jesus knew that the Pharisees had heard that he was baptizing and making more disciples than John. And then there's this quotation that's put in there we put it says, though Jesus himself didn't baptize them, his disciples did. So he left Judea and returned to Galilee. Jesus himself is never recorded as baptizing anyone. But he left the baptism up to the disciples. And again, we talked about that a little bit earlier. And the main reason probably is because Jesus didn't want to baptize people and then that go to their head. It's like, oh, well, my baptism was more important because I was baptized by Jesus. You were only baptized by so-and-so over here. We don't know who he is, but hey, I was baptized by Jesus, so I'm more important. So I think that seems to be it doesn't ever say why, but that leans to the possibility because we see, and we will see later on in the New Testament that there was some argument among some of the followers of God and followers of Jesus they were baptized by Paul or they were baptized by Apollos or this person, and so they were more important because they were baptized by these people. And so we need to make sure that in our own, it doesn't matter who you're baptized by, right? It's that you are. It doesn't matter any of that. So I think that's the reason why Jesus did that. John the Baptist and Jesus had official scrutiny focused on them because of their distinct message regarding repentance of the kingdom. Most likely here, so why Jesus left and returned to Galilee was one, John was arrested, and so Jesus wanted to avoid any possible clash. And we saw this happening already. There's a little bit of a kind of a clash going on with John's disciples who were, they were upset of his growing popularity. That's common, right? We need to be careful that we don't do that because it's not about who, it doesn't matter who the more popular minister is. It doesn't matter who has the biggest ministry. It doesn't matter if you're called to preach to 30 people or if you're called to preach to 200 or 1,000 people. We need to be happy with who we're called to preach with and focus on changing their lives and making sure they are, walking the Christian walk through this. So we don't need to get into this game of comparison. Comparison is a horrible thing for churches to get into and in competition and all that stuff. It's be who you're supposed to be who you're called to be. Don't worry about, what so-and-so down the street's doing. Be who you're supposed to be, and you'll be, make a whole lot better for your ministry. And so we see that. And so that's probably what's going on. And you had the Pharisees. They were also starting to focus, on his growing influence. And so Jesus probably just decided that and traveled north in order to avoid any conflict there as well. Again, Jesus Jesus was going to allow the conflict to happen when he wanted the conflict to happen. We see that as he gets closer to the cross, he becomes a lot more, you know, the conflict happens a whole lot more. He puts himself in a way in positions to upset them more, right? And to, you know, toward the end he calls them some pretty horrible names at the end, right? And so we're gonna look at that when we get there. So he is setting up how he wants this to play out. It's on his terms or God's terms, and it's not going to happen any sooner than he wants, and it's not going to happen any later. And so that was probably a little bit of the meaning behind why they took so, or why he decided to go ahead and move his ministry and return to Galilee. So again, not a lot here, not a lot, just a little short snippets, but you know, it's good to understand the reasoning and the why behind why Jesus is doing these things, or why we see, well, why did this happen with Paul, or why did this happen with John? Why did this happen with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Why did some people cover this but not others? And it helps us understand the Gospels more. And I appreciate the differences. I appreciate the differences that we see where, well, we can see where one person wrote about something, but this person didn't. Well, that makes sense because he was probably there. And I think that lends a little bit more legitimacy to the writings that we see, because I think I've said this before. If they all looked exactly alike, then that would be more suspicious than the fact that they have differences. You know, you can ask any police officer, right? If he's interviewing people, 3 or 4 witnesses, and they all give the exact same story, the exact same way, almost verbatim, then he knows that they're lying and they made it up beforehand. But if there's slight, subtle differences in their stories and the way they tell their stories, or the different point of view, then they know he's telling the truth. And I think that lends to the Gospels as well. We see those subtleties that happen when you have something written from different people who saw things from a different point of view. So, again, this is Jesus. He left Judea. We're going to move into the woman at the well, which is one of my favorite stories in the way. And we're actually it's going to take 2 days to cover this, but this is probably one of my favorite part of the Gospels. I love this story for many reasons, and we'll hit them on them. But again, you know, if you want to make sure you get these alerts, you can sign up. There's a link in our description. You can sign up for the form there, subscribe to our videos, and as always, thank you for watching.